Folklore chuige agránna bhar chuig de Blúiríní Béaloidis podcréile a tíocht thugah ó gnúsach beidir is éireann cloiste na hoscoile baile a clia. You're very welcome to episode 25 of Blúiríní Béaloidis, or Folklore Fragments, the podcast from the National Folklore Collection at University College Dublin. I hope you're keeping well and generally taking care out there in the alternate reality science fiction timeline we now call home. It's been a strange few months for all and sundry, and while the university and the folklore archive is still closed to the public, I've managed to cobble together a few sources for you, which I hope will satiate you in your undying thirst for all things folkloric. So, with the sun coursing high and the summer upon us, we will in this episode explore customs and practices marking the arrival of midsummer, a period of widespread jubilation and celebration in which communal bonfires are lit and in which protection is sought for crops, couples and cattle alike. We'll take a look at the evidence for pre-Christian European midsummer bonfires, or lack thereof, spoiler alert there, before examining altogether more recent, by which I mean from around the 6th century on, Christianized interpretations of midsummer, looking in detail at accounts of Irish midsummer celebrations, which are traditionally held on the eve of the feast of St. John on the 23rd of June, on the night of the 23rd of June. Now, before examining midsummer in greater detail, I think it's worth saying a few words regarding traditional conceptions of time, as opposed to purely materialist or purely modern, shall we say, conceptions of time. I want to do this in order to underpin our discussions regarding calendar custom and clarify the role and importance of ritual specifically in the traditional calendar year. So, from a materialist or modern perspective, time is understood, or could be seen to be understood, as a quantifiable, irreversible order of consecutive events, which is essentially indifferent to its own contents. So the timing of an event in this sense, or under this understanding, does not infer any special or spiritual quality upon it. From a traditional perspective, time is understood quite differently and does not flow uniformly, but is instead broken down into cycles and periods, each of which have their own functions and contain separate essential qualities and opportunities and so on. Festivals and rituals then serve to awaken or express the corresponding essence of the time at hand. So if you think of it in this way, our festivities and calendar customs represent a sort of sacred history defined qualitatively, as opposed to a purely secular conception of time, which is defined under the reign of quantity. So, clear as mud. Listeners to this podcast will be familiar with the quarter days, or the cross-quarter days, as they're sometimes known in Irish tradition. We've covered some of these in previous episodes, St. Bridget's Day and Samhain and so on. But it's worth covering and going over again. So if you imagine the year as a perfect circle, the quarter days, unsurprisingly enough, divide that circle into its 4 seasons of spring, summer, autumn and winter. And they do this with a festival, namely St. Bridget's Day, May Day, Garland Sunday or Lunasa, and Halloween or Samhain. So each of these mark a specific quarter day and a shift into a new season. Now imagine these festivals as falling at say 12 o'clock, 3 o'clock, 6 o'clock and 9 o'clock on a circle. Well, falling exactly halfway between each of these quarter days and further dividing the ritual year from 4 to 8 segments are the solstices and equinoxes. We have 2 solstices, where the sun essentially kind of stands still before reversing its direction, and equinoxes where day and night are of equal length. The sun, of course, doesn't actually stand still, just in case anyone started screaming there as they're listening. Anyway, around these dates, we see another host of important festivals appear. So apart from the quarter day traditions, at these times of equinoxes and solstices, we also see a host of important festivals appear. Some of you may have heard these before, for example, as Christmas and Easter-ish, which is kind of around the spring equinox. There are harvest festivals in Europe around the September equinox. And the feast of St. John's or Midsummer is celebrated in Ireland and elsewhere all over Europe as St. John's Eve, Bonfire Night, or Tinaféile Owen on the night of the 23rd of June. Midsummer, the shortest night of the year, with the sun at its height. All over Europe, St. John's Eve is celebrated in largely the same manner, with communal attendance at bonfires and revelry, sport, music, mirth and merriment being the order of the day. or night, as it were. The widespread distribution of these customs would suggest their being of some antiquity, but some 19th century scholars appear at times to have been wont to stare into midsummer bonfires a little too long, and they wound up waxing lyrical about the strong savour of pagan solar cults apparent in midsummer observances, etc. But in fact, it's actually very difficult to speak with any certainty concerning the pre-Christian origins of midsummer celebrations, especially where bonfires and fires and so on are concerned. In proclaiming the pagan origins of midsummer bonfires, one can find oneself swept and rolling swiftly down slippery slopes littered with the corpses of tweed-clad scholars of yore who previously attempted such feats. So James Fraser, who wrote The Golden Bough and so on, is a kind of classic for this. He was inspired by the ideas of Wilhelm Mannhardt, and he explained midsummer observances as, and here's a quote, sun charms or magical ceremonies intended to ensure a proper supply of sunshine for men, animal and plants. But other scholars have come to altogether different conclusions to Fraser in their own research and state that while sun worship was a feature of pre-Christian European tradition, observances in this regard tended to be held at the beginning of summer. And there's little by way of evidence to suggest that contemporary midsummer observances stem from indigenous northern European tribes in the same way, for example, that our midwinter Yule customs did. Jakob Grimm, writing in his Deutsche Mythologie, noted 2 seasons in summer for the lighting of fires in Germany, with Easter fires in the north of Germany and midsummer fires being held in the south. The former he regarded as the fires of native heathenism, which is an amazing quote. With the latter, midsummer fires, he determined as coming from the church, a borrowing from Italy, if I recall correctly. So, while vestiges of pre-Christian rites and observances are apparent in many other traditional festivals and calendar customs, suggestions that these midsummer festivities were carried out in the hope of ensuring more sunshine as part of a widespread pagan solar cult, etc., 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 they aren't supported by much evidence. That being said, the Romans celebrated the festival of Flores Fortuna, dedicated to the goddess of fortune and the personification of luck, on the 24th of June, though again, no reference to sun worship and no bonfires are described here. Writing nearly 2,000 years ago, the great Ovid described the occasion with the following. He said, "Time slips away and we grow old with the silent lapse of years. There is no bridle that can curb the flying days. How quickly has come round the festival of Flores Fortuna. Yet 7 days, and June will be over." The practices at this time involved inebriated youths travelling by boat to the temples of Flores Fortuna, as Ovid again describes, writing, "Ye flower-crowned skiffs, bear brands of youthful revellers, and let them quaff deep draughts of wine on the bosom of the stream." Eloquently put there, Ovid. Not sure one could describe a night in the town in Ireland in the same lovely terms. As to the rest of the day's revelry, Ovid is largely silent, though one expects that all those flower-festooned skiffs and the gentle quaffing of wine on the bosom of the stream and so on, all converted into a massive hangover on the 25th of June in ancient Rome. Anyway, whatever the origins of midsummer observances, it is safe to say that this period has long been observed as a sacred time for our forebears. The Council of Agde, the Council of Agde, I hear you say. This was held in the 6th century and was attended by household names and luminaries such as Tetradius of Bourges, Heraclianus of Toulouse, and Galactorius of Banarnum. They just don't make them like they used to, do they? Lists the feast of St. John the Baptist, i.e. midsummer, as among the highest feasts of the year. This was a day in which all the faithful had to attend Mass, and Mass was held 3 times a day. The only other day I think that happens is Christmas. And they also had to abstain from servile work, which is excellent. Going on to note that while most saints' feast days celebrate the saint's death, their death and subsequent birth into new life in heaven, St. John's Day is different in that it marks the nativity or birth of John the Baptist, Christ's cousin, and it falls exactly 6 months before Christmas. This is interesting and it's worth bearing about and spending some time on. Professor Eamon O'Cartagon, writing in Ritual and the Rood, Liturgical Images and the Old English Poems of the Dream of the Rood tradition, says that, here's his quote, "By the 6th century, this solar cycle was completed by balancing Christ's conception and birth against the conception and birth of his cousin John the Baptist. Such a relationship between Christ and his cousin was amply justified by the imagery of Scripture. The Baptist was conceived 6 months before Christ. We see this in Luke 1:36. He was not himself the light, but was to give testimony to the light. Thus, John's conception was celebrated on the 8th calends of October, the 24th of September, near the autumn equinox, and his birth on the 8th calends of July, the 24th of June, near the summer solstice. So, Christ's conception and birth takes place on the growing days, with the sun rising to its full potential from darkness of midwinter, while John the Baptist's takes place on the lessening days. And the Baptist himself proclaimed that he, i.e. Christ, must increase, but I must decrease. That's in John 3:30. So St. John's Eve then needs to be understood in the context of a sacred history, or a cyclical, qualitative, or traditional conception of time, as I mentioned at the outset of the podcast of this episode, in that it serves as a counterbalance to Christmas, with the sun's course reflecting the conception and life of these two sacred figures. So when you think of Midsummer, think of it as a sort of photo-negative to Christmas. And so to the festivities. St. John's Eve was marked all over Europe, and descriptions of this festival generally centre and revolve around a large communal bonfire, which was often lit on a height in the district. This fire was attended by young and old, and there was music, drinking, carousing, singing, sporting, dancing, prayer, divination games, and a general air of fun, with company being kept into the small, or indeed not so small, hours of the next morning. In my own case, I fondly recall celebrating Midsummer on Inishbofin off the west coast of Ireland many years ago, and having spent part of the afternoon cavorting around on some class of cement truck or other, gathering fuel from the locals, I seem to recall that we made quite a good night of it at the bonfire until all hours, in due deference to tradition, of course. Now, the following account is taken from a manuscript which was collected, the material of which was collected in Abbeyfield, County Limerick, in the western quarter of Ireland, and this material was collected under the 1937-1939 schools folklore scheme. And it outlines John's Eve observances in Ireland, and it notes the connection and parallels with Christmas. It says, St. John's Eve falls in midsummer, just as Christmas night falls in midwinter. What a sight it is to look around the countryside to see a bonfire by every family. The bonfire is lighted in the open during the summer solstice, while the Yule log is burned for a fire in the winter solstice. In some places, families gather together to light the bonfire. One person brings a part of brusna, that's fuel. Another person brings a sup of hay, while another brings a pint of petrol. Good man with the pint of petrol. It is lighted at dusk. Some sing a song and more dance. When the embers are dying out, they jump across it so as to have luck for the year. Then they bring a cow and make her jump it so as to have an increase in her milk in the future. In former days, if the people had a sick animal, they would burn it in the fire, and if they hadn't, they would preserve a bone of an animal for the purpose. Such customs are observed in most European countries. The reference to bones is interesting, and bones were generally a feature in the John's Eve fire. It's a common description that bones were specifically placed in the fire. Now, descriptions like this are related from countries all over Europe. The following piece from 1935, which is roughly contemporary to the Limerick manuscript I just related, concerns John's Eve celebrations as carried out in Spain, though they can just as easily be those of Ireland or her neighbours. The piece reads, no popular custom of this saint's day was more widespread in Europe than that of lighting bonfires as the nucleus of an unrestrained nocturnal festival. Hours before the bonfire, the young folk of the village are in a jubilant mood, bringing in wood for the bonfire, incessantly ringing the church bells and setting off firecrackers. As soon as the sun sinks, the mighty peal of a bell is the signal for the lighting of the fire, which becomes the magnet for the entire village. The smaller boys jump over the fire, following ancient custom. The bells continue their strident din. The wine, served from improvised booths, animates the youths and maidens to dance. To the music of folk songs, the crowd joins in a lively dance. The fire dies down. The older folk go peacefully home, but the young lovers continue to sing and wander about the village until dawn. Happy out. Other European midsummer observances bear great likeness to Irish calendar customs from different parts of the year. In Asturias, young men used to climb certain peaks on the morning of St. John's Day in order to watch the sun dance. That's a practice that will be very familiar to Irish listeners as something that was carried out on Easter morning in days gone by. In certain parts of Spain, girls used to stroll nude in the dewy meadows on the morning of St. John's Day, the morning dew having special curative virtues at this time. This again is a custom commonly practiced in Ireland, but on the morning of the 1st of May, and it must be noted in a somewhat less scandalous approach than that employed by the Spanish. It was customary for Irish girls to merely wash their faces in the morning dew. In Latvia, it was believed that witches stole the dew from the grass on midsummer morning while reciting a charm, everything to me, everything to me. Through this charm, one's milk profit would be stolen. Again, this exact custom is found in Ireland, but is associated with the morning of the 1st of May. Swedish midsummer observances tend not to feature large communal bonfires and are centred instead around the maypole. And indeed, I recall visiting the midsummer maypole with my Swedish friends a couple of years ago and having a banquet of pickled herring and fresh potatoes while imbibing considerable amounts of schnapps and singing midsummer songs, again in due deference to tradition. Now, many of the customs and practices we associate with midsummer seem to go back at least to the Middle Ages. The following account, taken from an article by Michael Anderson, who is Associate Professor of Musicology at the Eastman School of Music in the University of Rochester in New York and Artistic Director of Scala Antica, a medieval and Renaissance music group based in Chicago, describes medieval practices as carried out by the fantastically named Brotherhood of the Green Wolf on the eve of St. John's in France. He writes, "Each year, on the evening of the 23rd of June, the Brotherhood of the Green Wolf chose its new chief. Arrayed in a brimless green hat in the shape of a cone, the elected master led the men to a priest and choir. Together, the group processed to the church for Mass, chanting the hymn of St. John the Baptist, Ut Coeant Laxus. After Mass and dinner, they danced and lit a bonfire as music ensued. Following the ringing of handbells, the men sang the Te Deum and vernacular parodies of Ut Coeant Laxus. Just before midnight, the Brotherhood surrounded their elected Green Wolf leader and pretended to throw him into the fire. After the stroke of 12, the ceremony devolved into chaos as voices bellowed and fiddles played through the night around the fire. The next day, the raucous gaiety continued. To the sound of musketry, the brothers paraded through streets with gigantic loaf of bread adorned with greenery and ribbons." Now, I don't know about you, but I'm prepared to go on record formally here to say that I have a brimless cone hat wearing esoteric order-shaped hole in my life and can think of few things better than to spend time with the Brotherhood of the Green Wolf, carousing through the town with muskets, attending bonfires, ringing handbells, chanting, generally devolving into chaos, and parading gigantic loaves of ribboned bread hither and yon. But that's just me. Now, Professor Anderson mentions two hymns which the fraternity sang as part of their celebrations, the Te Deum and Ut Coeant Laxus, the latter being a hymn in honour of St. John the Baptist. And I'd like to send my thanks to Professor Anderson and Scala Antica for permission to share with you their beautiful version of Ut Coeant Laxus, and we will assume, judging by the sacred and measured tones of the piece as here rendered, that this was recorded just before the brimless cone hats, ribbon loaves, and so on were cast by the fraternity into the bonfire amid the noise of musketry and chaos, etc. You can find more beautiful music by Scala Antica by visiting their website at www.scala-antica.org, and I'll put a link up in the SoundCloud description for the podcast page on SoundCloud. Now, the Midsummer Bonfire was a much anticipated event, with fuel being gathered in the weeks ahead of the feast, and both young and old, and men and women, all coming together to join in the sport on the night of the 23rd. The following recording was made by Leo Corduff for the Department of Irish Folklore in 1973, and in this recording, Leo is talking with Michael Garvin of Glenamoy, Erris, County Mayo. And Michael, in this piece, describes how the fire was lit on the road where all were gathered together.
Well, tell me on St. John's night now.
Well, St. John's night in the olden times was a great night. They must make a great fire and sing and dance and everything. But now, like, everything is quite new.
Well, where in Glencullen did they make the fire?
Well, round about on the road. They'd they'd all gather up then.
Was it on a height or in a hollow?
Well, say on the middle of the road, and the most convenient place.
Yeah.
So, of course, you know, there was no turf. You could hardly make a fire for St. John's this time because there was no dry turf.
This year?
Yes.
Oh, yeah. Was it with turf that make it that?
No, it's turf on a bonfire.
And what kind of bone?
Any kind of bone, a sheep's bone or a cow bone, but don't make result of bone.
Oh, I see.
No use. But
where would they get the turf? I mean, would they?
They stack the turf and they have the turf of their own, you know. Do you understand?
Oh, yeah.
Get a creel, 2 creels of turf and...
Would they go around to every house?
No. Well, anywhere nearest place the turf would be convenient to take it and make a big pile and put in your coals and don't put in your big bone and the sense of the fire. You didn't put in the bone, it was no use.
Oh, I see.
That's St. John's bonfire, the 24th of June.
I see. Well, tell me, would there be people that might object to giving turf?
No. No. And all the old people come in and pray and go down their knees and go round the rosary maybe 3 times.
Would they say the rosary around the fire?
Yeah. Well, the old people say it in their own mind, you know,
Oh,
the rosary.
wouldn't be said out loud.
Well, they'd be saying it loud enough. But my word wasn't rosary, it was giving them bother. They'd be devilment, talking together. The rosary wasn't giving them all bother.
I see.
Yeah.
Well, who would light the fire then, John? Was there any special person in the village? That
Well,
would light it?
nearly all. Me and what do you call him? I was Carolyn and Granahan, another cousin of mine, and a good few of them like that, and Ginty, which near, but the height was on the road, we'd collect the turtle. The main time, then you see on the fire being blazed, you'd see them coming. One shouting and one laughing, and so on. The other one asking, is there many girls here, and so on.
Mhm.
Old people come then with the rosary beads that'd bring a load of hay and go down their knees and take off their hat and pray away.
They'd bring hay with them.
I say a rosary beads that'd bring a load of hay and exactly the rosary beads that.
Oh, I see.
Yes.
Well, used they take anything out of when the old people be going home? Would they take anything from the fire then?
Everyone who wanted to hear cold throw it into the piece of peas and into the piece of oats.
Mhm.
And there come no blights in.
I see.
And the oats would be good. But we saw the coal going into the piece of peas and the blight to come.
Sure. But the people believed in it anyway. But did you ever hear anything, John, that if somebody from a different townland, supposing I came from Rossport,
Yeah.
and if I took a coal with me or anything like that, would you lose your crops and that I could bring you to Rossport?
No, I heard there was a fellow, and he's out in Ballinayet, that he took a coal. There was a bonfire in Blúiríní, and he brought a coal into Ballinayet, and they didn't like it. And he's there in Ballinayet, he's not in my candle, it's a big garage.
Oh.
Yeah.
He brought the luck with him.
Aye. He brought the coal with him. Anyhow.
I see.
This next manuscript account, collected in Clonlara, County Clare, gives a sense of the anticipation in which the night was held in this part of the country. It says, "We celebrate the feast of St. John on the 24th of June. It is anxiously looked forward to by young and old on account of the big bonfires that are lit the preceding night. Days before it, long ago, people were very busy gathering sticks, furze bushes, sods of turf, old timber, all kinds of fire material. There was great excitement in each locality, each one wanting to have the biggest fire. On this night, the members of each locality gathered together. They went up to a hill, and here they lit the fire. Everyone had to do something. The old sat down and told many stories of the adventures of old. At the same, they enjoyed a smoke of the clay pipe. The young entertained themselves by telling stories, singing and reciting pieces. Then they gave refreshments to the old people. The fire lasted until morning almost, as they had a lot of material for it. When they were about to leave, they got a big furze bush, lit it with fire, and drew it across their fields, meadows, and crops, saying in Irish, in the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Ghost, Amen. They believed that by doing this they would have a blessing on their crops for the year. In other parts of the country, a custom they had was to drive the beasts of the farm into the corner of a meadow or field. Then they got a furze bush and lit it from the bonfire. They struck each beast to the back with it, saying at the same time, May the Almighty Father, Son, and Holy Ghost preserve my share. Amen. That was collected by Bridget Clancy in Clonlara, County Clare. Now, midsummer fires tend in Irish tradition to be divided into 2 main types. The first was the large communal bonfire at which the entire community was attendance. That was the one that the Brotherhood of the Green Wolf were hanging out at in France. And the second was a smaller, quieter fire. This is held by the family in Ireland. So this is the kind of family fire, which is sometimes known as St. John's fireplace. Indeed, the cover image for this edition of the podcast shows one such fireplace. It was a photograph taken by Kevin Danaher on Midsummer's Eve around the year 1960, and it shows young boys and girls of the family gathered around a small bonfire. Prayers were often recited at the family bonfire, which often consisted of no more than 1 or 2 furze bushes and a few sods of turf. It was usually lit in the farmyard close to the house, and when the smaller family fire died out, the members of the household left it and joined in the fun at the larger communal midsummer bonfire. The communal midsummer bonfire was often lit at a crossroads, or at commonage, or some other high vantage point where it could be seen for miles around, and being lit at nightfall, at times an elderly person or the oldest gathered at the assembly was asked to light the fire, which they did while reciting the following prayer: in honour de Dhia agus den Nivon agus Chantura agus Chantarvre Gur agus Seher and an Manahar agus an Vic agus an Spridniv. Amen. Which translates as, in honour of God and St. John, to the fruitfulness of and profit of our planting and our work, in the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. The fire being lit, more prayers were often recited by those congregated around it, sometimes with attendees kneeling down to pray, or with decades of the rosary being recited as part of a sunwise procession around the fire. Or a small pebble might be kept to keep count, being thrown into the fire after each prayer. With prayers finished, the merriment began in earnest. Horns were blown, tin cans were beaten, and a general din and melee ensued before a night of dancing, storytelling, recitation, song, and music commenced, with all having to give their party piece to those in attendance. The following account, recorded by Jim Delaney from William Finneran of Liscodburn, County Roscommon in 1977, describes the gathering of fuel for the bonfire throughout the month of June and the late hours kept at it to celebrate John's Eve.
Do you remember the bonfire?
I do. The bonfire was it was everywhere some years ago. It's only dying out now.
Yeah. So where you used to have it here in your village?
At the end of the road there, you know where the turn is now, where they widen the road out. That was,
here?
Yeah. That was the place for it.
Well, tell us how that worked out now.
Well, you know the time of the year the bonfire was, everyone was going to the bog
at
that time.
Yeah.
And coming on to the bonfire, the lads would say, well, it's time to start gathering for the bonfire now. And every evening when they be coming home, they'd bring home some of the spada, as they call it, you know, the old turf that was cast during
that's right. That's your stuff.
Yeah. And then if they were progressive, they had new turf. And that was a great thing, to have new turf for the bonfire.
Yeah.
So they dumped it there at the end of the road and brought timber and everything they could collect. That would burn, and that would be going on for nearly a week beforehand. And then when the 23rd come, they lit the fires. And once the sparks and smoke went up the cloud, it's like the Indian smoke signals.
What time then did they light the fire?
Well, sometimes the kids, you know, they'd come and they might light it a bit early for the adult population. They might light it at 7 or 8 o'clock in the evening, you know, around that time.
And how long did it go on till?
It went on until the fire burned out then. If it was a good crowd, I hadn't went on a long time. You know.
Was they dancing at it?
Oh yeah.
Did they have any food at it?
No, there was no food. And no dancing shoes either. A good rough road. There's no tar roads that time.
No.
Yeah. And now when they have good roads to dance on, there's no one to dance on.
This next manuscript account, collected in Thurles, County Tipperary, describes the sense of anticipation and the fun that was had by the people on St. John's Eve, or simply Bonfire Night as it was known in the area. It reads: the people of this district in olden times used to look forward to St. John's Day, which is commemorated on the 24th of June, for it was a great time of merrymaking for them. On the eve of this day they could be seen drawing logs of wood, turf, and everything they could procure to make a good bonfire to an appointed crossroad. When the fire was lit, the people gathered round it, and a lively dance went on. The ringing laughter and the merry shouts of the dancers could be heard for miles around. This great night of amusement was commonly called Bonfire Night. That piece was collected in Thurles in Tipperary. A favourite pastime at the fire involved the young boys of the district, who would snatch burning sticks and embers from the fire before casting them high into the air. At other times, a pitchfork might be thrust into the fire and a blazing piece of wood held aloft and brandished about impressively. The playwright John Minton Singh, along with his friend the artist Jack B. Yeats, brother of the great William Butler Yeats, bore witness to the casting of embers into the air on Midsummer Eve when visiting Belmullet in County Mayo in 1905. He describes the event as follows, writing that the impression one gets of the whole life is not a gloomy one. Last night was John's Eve, and bonfires, a relic of druidical rites, were lighted all over the country, the largest of all being placed in the town square of Belmullet, where a crowd of small boys shrieked and cheered and threw up firebrands for hours together. This next account, recorded by Tom Munnelly from Junior Crean of Bonneville, County Clare, describes the celebrations of St. John's Eve, from gathering for the fire to the celebrations of music and dancing and so on held on the night itself. So here's Tom in conversation with Junior.
Well, I remember you did a programme there a few years ago with Kieran about the St. John's fire.
Oh, yeah.
Would you just tell me about St. John's Day and St. John's Eve around here in general for a start?
Well, there'd be bonfires all over the place, and Topsy Hills and the crossroads, and of course the dancing and the music would be at the crossroads too. And here over just 100 yards over the road was the crossroads. And we'd be preparing for the fire a month before St. John's Day come. And that time people used to be drawn turf with horses and cars. And one young lad would have to do century at the cross every day. So I did it myself. And you would ask 2 sides of turf from every carman. And they'd throw down 2, maybe 3 or 4. And they'd bring usually 3 creels or 4 in the day, and that'd be 12 sads or 8 sads. And we had a reeky turf nearly by the time the night of the bonfire came. So all the people, young and old, would come to the crossroads, and the fiddles and flutes would be there, and the dancing sits, and until 12 or 1 o'clock in the night.
Now, time, I think, for a piece of music as the night's entertainment around the fire hit full pelt. This next piece from the archive, while not recorded around a midsummer bonfire, perhaps thankfully, was recorded by Kevin Danaher and Sean O'Hoig for the Irish Folklore Commission in Donegal in 1949. The piece in question, Maggie Pickens, is played here by Mickey Doherty, who is accompanied by the dancing of Conal Machanluhan. The fire, while serving as the focal point for the night's entertainments, was also believed to bring prosperity, protection and luck to those in attendance. As the flames settled, more daring fellows in attendance would leap across it backwards and forwards in displays of bravado, or couples might jump over it for luck. Sir William Wilde, writing in Irish popular superstitions, describes how if a man was about to perform a long journey, he leapt backwards and forwards 3 times through the fire to give him success in his undertaking. If about to wed, he did it to purify himself for the marriage state. If going to undertake some hazardous enterprise, he passed through the fire to render himself invulnerable. As the fire sunk low, girls tripped across it to procure good husbands. Women great with child might be seen stepping through it to ensure a happy delivery, and children were also carried across the smouldering ashes. The protective nature of the midsummer fire extended not only to those in attendance, but to the animals and crops of the district. A common theme described regarding St. John's Eve fire was its use in ensuring a bountiful harvest. This next manuscript account from Bandon, County Cork, describes how the fire was used to protect both crops and people. It says, "Bonfires are still kept up, and in one family the farmer or his wife jump over the red embers for luck. The wife, Mrs. Murphy, takes a kindled stick and ashes to each field where a crop is going, i.e. corn, wheat, potatoes and roots. This red ash is supposed to banish the fairies and keep the crop from being blighted. In other parts the people dance around the fire, and in Mayo a boy who has a wish to marry a neighbouring girl is particular to catch her hands and dance around the fire, hoping to be lucky in this way of getting the colleen." This next recording, made by Dahi O'Hogan from Tommy Hannon in County Limerick, describes how couples used to jump through the midsummer fire.
On St. John's Eve, we used to light big bonfires on the hill of Bruff and all, and you'd see 'em blazing in the hill of Knockgore, and you'd see 'em blazing in Knockane, and you'd see 'em blazing in Knockderk. We used to light 'em always, 'twas a custom.
What you see the old family around the fire?
Oh, we'd sing and dance and all that, and the girls used to jump across the fire and all that, and the boy and the girl, and see which of them they'd be married if they could jump the fire. That was an old custom here. When the fire was out, each one took home a pinch of ashes.
Yeah, for what?
I don't know what it was, but everyone took a pinch of ashes from the embers. I did. I remember that custom quite well, sure. That carried on up to, actually, the time of the last war. I did. We used to always gather, and we'd gather up everything in a big bonfire up on the hill, up all furs and all that. The other fellows in Knockderk and Knockany and Lockgore would have their fires. There'd be a big beacon, and look towards Drum and you'd see another. The whole countryside used to be lit up on that night. The custom seemed to have died completely. I don't know, you don't see any of those things now.
Glowing embers and ashes were also taken from the fire and deposited or thrown into the fields in order to bless and protect the crops. Ashes from the fire might be taken home and placed in the dairy, or a charred stick from the fire would be used to mark a cross over the door of the outhouses. Cattle were sometimes struck with burning embers from the fire, and furze or gorse bushes lit from the midsummer fire were often used for exactly this purpose, as the following manuscript piece from County Limerick describes. It says, "On St. John's Eve there is a sheaf lit and taken out, and each beast is struck with it. The end of the sheaf is then brought in and placed between the thatch and the rafters. This was done to protect the cows from all harm during the year." Another account from County Wexford describes a similar practice, outlining how on St. John's Eve every place is lit up with bonfires. The farmers make the sheep and cattle leap over them and ask God to bless the animals. They also ask him to bless the whole farm and crops. Indeed, ashes from the midsummer fire, along with a mixture of water and blood, sometimes drawn from the cattle themselves, was given as a drink to cows, slightly gross, in order to protect them from malign influence throughout the year, having to drink your own blood and water and ash to protect you. We return now to a conversation between Tom Munnelly and Junior Crean, in which Junior describes the protection of cattle at midsummer.
The old men had a custom. Of course, it wouldn't be dark till 11 o'clock, the longest day in the year. And when the darkness had come, the cattle would get the smell of the smoke, and they'd see the light, and they'd come around snuffing, and they'd be around the fields inside the cross. And the old men used to tell us, the fir bushes would be there specially for this. Light the fir bushes and chase the cattle. that it was a sign of luck. They'll bring their calves all right and there'll be no trouble or no sickness with them. It was an old custom.
Did they have a special name for them bushes at all, Junior?
No, the first bush. But yeah, the fire at all for a month of nights. To be the next night again, but the big crowd wouldn't be there, only the locals, you know, and they'd be dancing away for nearly while the turf at home.
Now they just tip the calves with the lighting bushes there, would they?
They would chase them around, you know. If they could keep up to them, they'd give them a little singe, like.
And would they ever throw the bushes into the fields for the same reason that, you know, you'd get a good crop?
They used, yes.
But did they have that in mind, Junior?
They had, I suppose they had. But then dashes would be brought and shaking the crops. The potatoes and the corn and vegetables. Father, the Son, the Holy Ghost, and you'd shake it around. And it was supposed to bring that the crops would grow well, no disease, no.
It's worth noting that there also existed other midsummer beliefs and customs aside from those centred around the bonfire. Herbs were often gathered at this time by women, and St. John's wort in particular was believed to be efficacious as a protection against malign supernatural influence or interference. Tradesmen in certain parts of the country used to march dressed in ribbons and sashes on this day, as indeed did tradesmen in Galway. Hardiman's History of Galway describes the practice thus. The Nativity of St. John the Baptist they celebrate a very peculiar kind of pageantry. On the evening of that day, the young and old assemble at the head of the village, and their mayor, whose orders are decisive, adjusts the rank, order, and precedence of this curious procession. Then they set out, headed by a band of music, and march with loud and continued huzzas and acclamations of joy, accompanied by crowds of people through the principal streets and suburbs of the town. The young men, all uniformly arrayed in short white jackets with silken sashes, their hats ornamented with ribbons and flowers, and upwards of 60 or 70 of the number bearing long poles and standards with suitable devices which are in general emblematic of their profession. To heighten the merriment of this festive scene, two of the stoutest, disguised in masks and entirely covered with partly coloured rags as merry men, with many antic tricks and gambols, make way for the remainder. In the course of their progress, they stop with loud cheerings and salutations opposite of the houses of the principal inhabitants, from whom they generally receive money on the occasion. Having at length regaled their village, they assemble in groups, dancing around and sometimes leaping and running through their bonfires, never forgetting to bring home part of the fire which they consider sacred, and thus the night ends as the day began, in one continued scene of mirth and rejoicing. It's worth noting that St. John appears to have been regarded as the patron of stonemasons and tradesmen in medieval Europe, and indeed the Freemasons historically celebrate this day as an important one. The Grand Lodge of Ireland used to install their Grand Master on the feast of St. John, and the first Grand Masonic Lodge was formed on the feast day of St. John the Baptist in 1717, so there may be some lingering connection here from the custom just described. In other quarters, the blessing of boats and nets of fishermen took place, and in other parts of the country, holy wells dedicated to the saint were visited by the local populace. Not all, however, attributed the origins of the midsummer fires to St. John, and a curious belief in Limerick was held regarding Anya, the goddess of summer and sovereignty. Anya dwells on Knockany, or Cnoc Anya, literally the hill of Anya, as is described in this account from County Limerick, which reads, Cnoc Anya, or Anya's Hill. Fairs and sports were held here from the remotest times in connection with the Fianna. Here resides the Dedanan fairy Anya, who rules over Munster as Queen of the Fairies. Now, farmers in the locality used to bring lighted torches to her tomb on midsummer before bringing them back home again and leaving them in their fields to garner her protection for the year ahead. So, as we sit here with the fire burning down to the embers, I can only wish you good health and farewell. May Fortuna smile on you, may the Brotherhood of the Green Wolf cavort in your general direction, and may St. John the Baptist himself bless you and see that your labour bears good fruit. I'm going to leave you now with a piece from Tommy Hannon as he describes the mysterious practices at Cnoc Anya and the strange goings on there at midsummer. Thanks for listening, and until next time, Slán Bio.
She's supposed to be Anna Clea, but she
Who was that?
who was?
Anna Clea.
She was the woman who the hill is actually named after, isn't she? Isn't she her tomb on the top of the hill?
Is that right?
Yes, I could point it out to you any day. There's a big mound on the top of the hill where this Anna Clare is supposed to be buried. But she's supposed to have come there. And sure then there's to light the clears and all these farmers, well, the Quinlans and all those who lived around there, they'd all go up on a pilgrimage and lay a clear all round this grave on a certain night in the year.
What night was it, Tommy?
I think 'twas in about St. John's time, the 22nd is it of July? In about that time. They'd all go up the hill with the lighted clear and lay it up on this mound.
What's a clear, Tommy?
It's actually just to be said a turf lighting on top of a impaled on a stick or a pike.
For what, Tommy?
It was a custom. Custom.